I've just got back from Europe. I only got back the day before yesterday, and I spent yesterday catching up on all the stuff I got behind me while I was in Europe. So,
what were you doing there?
TVs and a little bit of radio, but mainly TVs. And we did Italy and Germany.
Was that for the album?
Yeah, so it was indirectly for the album, because out there, the Dreaming, the single, is still happening. So
It's done better over there, has it?
well, it's only just starting to happen, so we're doing TVs to help it. And every show we did the Dreaming. So, it'd be interesting to see how it does. But it all helps the album, really.
Sure.
So I was into doing it from that point of view. It's great. It's just very busy, that's all.
I saw the video for The Dreaming. They eventually did get it on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, very up to scratch, should I say,
You liked it? Oh, good.
It was like it's similar to the stage set, the dancers, but it had the benefit of all the people in the background. And where was it shot?
We shot it in UX, which is a video studio in Wandsworth.
Oh, that was a studio?
Yeah.
Right.
It was a very good set, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Incredible set designers.
Where did you get the guys from?
I actually found those set designers through the director I was using, through their production company.
Who did direct it?
It was Golden Dawn Productions, a guy called Paul Henry.
Yeah. And what's going to be the next single that you're working on?
Well, we've done the video for the next one, which is There Goes a Tenor.
Sorry?
There Goes a Tenor.
What's that about? Is it about robbery?
Yeah. Yeah.
What, sort of pickpockets in the East End, etc.?
Yeah. It's about amateur robbers who've only done small things, and this is like quite a big robbery that they've been planning for months. And when it actually starts happening, they start freaking out. They're really scared, and they're so aware of the fact that something could go wrong that they're just freaked out and paranoid and want to go home.
Really? Is it based on any kind of film?
No, it's sort of all the films I've seen with robberies in. The crooks have always been incredibly in control and calm. And I always thought that if I ever did a robbery, I'd be really scared, I'd be really worried. So I thought, I'm sure that's a much more human point of view.
Yeah. You see, the thing was, I thought it might be based on a film. It was on telly over Christmas. It was about a guy that was blackmailed into doing a robbery. And, of course, he really was scared. And the further he got sort of involved in it, he had to carry it out.
Right.
But he was having the sleepless nights and stuff. And in the end,
how did he get blackmailed? Because he'd murdered someone.
He'd been in prison a long time.
Right.
And therefore, when the robbery took place, like the mafia bosses who were organising it knew they had a stool pigeon.
Wow.
And so they got him to do it.
Great. Yeah, similar sort of thing, isn't it? 'Cause I'm sure like a lot of these young kids, when they actually get into a situation where it is, not just a little job, it must be really scary.
Yeah. What made you think about it? I mean, have you run into these East End types before? Or?
No, I think it was much more the thing of watching a lot of films, and things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's lots of films where robberies take place, and yet they're glorifying them. They always make the robbery something very heroic and fun, and risky and dangerous. But for me, it's something incredibly scary. Something that has such a potential of going wrong that it's not worth the risk. And I don't think it's something that should be glorified at all. I think it's something that should be made very real, so that people realise that it's not worth the effort.
Yeah.
It's not something that's fun. It's something that's just not worth the effort. Because people end up in jail for bloody years.
And is that the video you were shooting in the train carriage on the way up to Manchester?
That was
That
was the one we were practising for, yes.
Really?
But only because we didn't have any time. Because that show came up at the last minute.
Right.
And we were planning to rehearse all that night, so instead of doing it in the studio, we did it in the back of the train like this. It's really
and how many of you were there sort of in that guard's van?
There were just the three of us. They cleared it out for us. It was really great of them, actually.
What,
There
yourself?
were each station we stopped at, there'd be various guards who'd pull the window down and go, what then? Because they're just checking us out. And it's great, they cleared all the post and chickens and pigs and all the things.
Really?
And they
Get some odd things, don't you?
So it was completely empty carriage. It was beautiful. The only thing was we could hardly hear the tape recorder because the noise was so bad.
Right.
So we were more or less having to sort of keep checking the... And it was very hard to stay stationary at 150 miles an hour.
And that kind of dance somehow can get incorporated to a film about a robbery.
Yeah.
That should be interesting.
See, one of the bits in the song is all about waiting, and how, like the first time they're just waiting for something to go wrong, and the second time they're just like waiting for the guy to blow the safe up, because when he blows it up there's so much that could go wrong. And it's like a dance routine that's like based on waiting, and so it's like this sort of thing where it's like, you know, just all these ideas of people waiting, and the rest of the dance is more acting out what the story says, really. It's not so much a dance at all.
Do you think this one's going to be more successful than the last one?
I don't know. I don't know what to think about singles anymore.
Was it your idea for it to be a single?
What, There Goes a Tenor? Yes, I think I was in full agreement with them. But I think I've reached a stage where, because the dreaming didn't work, we all felt, especially from an airplay point of view, that in order to get airplay, which you need for a single to work, that we should go for one that was more obvious. And there's no doubt that There Goes a Tenor is one of the more obvious songs.
Not that there are a lot on the album that are obvious.
No. So we're just going for this and see what happens.
I mean, it's quite a bold move to go into that kind of direction, particularly when you've been out of the limelight for a year or two. But
yes,
how sensible do you think it is? I mean, it's easily the least commercial stuff you've ever done this album.
Yes.
At a time when perhaps you should have been doing the most.
Yes. You see, from my point of view, although I've been out of the limelight from the last album, all I was planning to do was make another album as quickly as I could. But since I wrote the songs, I realised that it was very different. And all the time I do very much want to change my album. And I do actually think that the direction I'm going in is away from the commercial, or the obvious commercial.
Sure.
But I think, from my point of view, it wasn't so much because I was out of the limelight that I had to do something more commercial. Because at that time, I wasn't actually out of the limelight. I was just starting my next album, and I thought it was only going to take me a couple of months. But before I know it, the whole thing has become much more involved. The songs are much more involved, and I know that it's going to take me at least 6 months to a year to get it the way I want. So by the time it's finished, I've been out of the public eye for maybe, apart from Sat in Your Lap, of course, which in fact got to number 11.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget about that, you see. They just forget that ever happened. So I've been completely out of the public eye for 2 years.
Well, it's funny actually you should say Sat in Your Lap, because I mean, when that came out and all those drums, I thought, this is general. I thought, like, she's trying to cash in on the old Adamant tribal drum sounds.
Yeah. You see, again, that was very annoying, because when I'd actually started getting that together, I mean, Adamant wasn't really happening as such. So,
was Rolf Harris more of an influence even then? Things like Sunner Eyes?
Yes, I mean, I've wanted to work with Rolf for like 2 or 3 years, because when I did the last album, I had an idea for doing a song all about Australia, which would have didgeridoos and all this sort of thing.
What, for Never Forever?
Yes, but I just didn't have the time to actually sit down and write the song. And the same with Houdini. I had lots of ideas about writing the song for Houdini, but I just didn't have the time to do it because I was actually making that album. And already for that album I'd managed to, because at that time I hadn't written Army Dreamers yet, but I knew I wanted to write a song about that. And it was during the album that I wrote that song.
What, the false romanticism of the military sort of thing?
What, the Army Dreamers thing? Yeah, the whole thing of kids getting caught up in it, yeah. And it was only really because I just managed to pull the song together in time that got on the last album.
Right.
But I really wanted to make that song a few years ago, but I'm sure if I had it wouldn't have sounded anything like it did on this album, so I'm glad that it waited, really. But I think a lot of the ideas for the stuff on this album have in fact been things I've wanted to do for years, but just haven't been ready for it or haven't had the time. Because the whole tribal and ethnic thing has really been happening within my family because of my brother Paddy for 10 years. And I mean, he's the one who's been gradually pulling me that way. I mean, even on the first album, there were a lot of unusual instruments hidden amongst the sort of arrangements, which were very much speaking from my side of things and my brother's. And I think gradually, each time I've done an album, I've got more control, and therefore been able to portray a lot more of what I really mean to get across.
Oh, I see. I mean, Houdini, it's a wild track, that Houdini. It certainly gets a bit manic.
Right.
What's it about?
It's all about Houdini from Mrs. Houdini's point of view.
Sorry?
Mrs. Houdini.
The Houdini, the escape artist?
That's right, he was married.
Right.
And his wife was actually quite involved with his whole life and his work. And she used to help him a lot with the tricks. And one of the things, which is what the album cover's about, is before he went off into his tank, where he was all tied up and everything, she'd give him a parting kiss. And as she kissed him, she'd pass him a tiny little key, which he then later used when he was in the water to
unlock all the chains.
And as soon as I heard that imagery, I just thought it was so beautiful and so extraordinary. And if you tie that in with the whole side of his life, where he was completely obsessed with exposing mediums as frauds. I don't know if you know anything about
No.
This was another side of him. His mother died, and he was really, really close to her, like really close. And when she died, he needed desperately to try and communicate with her through medium. And he just came across all these people who were basically making money out of the art of pretending to speak to the dead. And when he realised all these people were just, basically ruining people's lives just to make some money, he decided to, in a very positive way, show that they were frauds and tricksters. So he spent years of his life dedicating time to finding any medium who said that they were really authentic and proving that they were completely false. So he spent years of his life doing this and ruining people's careers and getting an awful lot of spiritualists at the time. Before he died, he said to his wife that I'm going to die before you, and when I do, I'm going to try everything I can to try and come back through a real medium. And there'll be one way that you'll know it's me, because all these tricksters and that are going to jump on the wagon and say that I've come through. And I'm going to use words that only you and I know. It's a code. And so you'll know that it's me and no one else. So they made this code together, and when he died, she went round all the seances waiting for him to come through. And it's extraordinary, really, because the thing happened on 3 levels. Because apparently, when he first got his stage acts together, he was more into magic and the same kind of fraud. And he used to do things where he would pretend he was contacting the dead, and he would tell the audiences messages from their dead people, and it was all a trick. And then it happened to him through his mother, where they were all tricking him because he wanted to contact his mother. And then exactly the same thing happened to his wife after his death, when they were all trying to trick her that he had come through. And it's just so extraordinary that really that whole link with him escaping chains and things, and then trying to escape death, and this weird sort of parallel of contact and frauds. It's just an incredibly extraordinary man and story.
How did you get into all this?
Just heard about it. I don't even remember how I first heard about the big thing of the exposing mediums. I mean, that was what started it, really, because it was such a strange story, the fact that he should be so obsessed with proving that they weren't real. And then I started hearing about how his wife was involved, because I didn't even know that he was married. And as soon as there was like an emotional contact, the fact that there was some woman who was really in love with him, who stuck with him through it all, it became a perfect angle to write from, really. Especially when you thought about that even when he was dead, she spent all her time trying to be with him. It's very strong stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And the credits on the album, there's 2 mentioned. There's Gordon Farrell. Who's that?
He was my singing teacher.
Really?
Yeah. Years ago, I used to go every week for his lessons, and really it was great because he gave me loads of confidence in singing, which is what I needed more than anything. And I just used to go to him half an hour a week, and by the end of the year, I felt a lot more, really a lot more confident in myself as a singer. Worked wonders. And on Houdini, I don't know if you noticed at the end, but there are these and that's him.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It's great.
And so you gave him mention from that point of view.
Yeah, he sang on it.
And what's the Rosabelle believe bit?
Wow. Well, that's actually the words that were the code between him and her.
Between Houdini and his wife?
Yeah. And they were the words that proved to her that it was him and only him.
And why did you put Del Palmer's name next to that?
Because he was the one who actually pretended to be him in the song. The idea in the song was that it was the voice of Houdini, perhaps coming from the other side, when in fact it was Del on the telephone.
Oh, I see. Del played that part. He played that sort of
It
role.
was on the end of a telephone. It's good.
But Del's also the bass player on quite a few of the tracks.
Yes, he is, yeah.
Because the funny thing is, you got Jimmy Bain, right, who was in a mad sort of, he was in Rainbow, and he's in Wild Horses.
Wild Horses.
He seems to play on all the crazier tracks.
I think what I enjoyed again about this album, because each track has got a very different mood really, or groups of tracks have got different moods.
Yeah.
And it was nice to use people almost specifically for what they were very good at. And I mean, I always think of Jimmy as being a really simple rock and roll bass player, which doesn't mean to be detrimental. Because I think it's great actually. Because what those songs needed that he was on was a very simple, very driving bass that was just going to keep the whole thing going without being distracting or too full.
Right.
And Jimmy was just right for that really. So he worked on the 3 tracks that I would definitely say were the rockiest, were the most up-tempo, perhaps the most aggressive.
And did that have something to do with the fact that he'd with Wild Horses had a contract with EMI and he was still under...
Oh, see, I didn't even know he was with EMI.
Really?
I knew he was with Wild Horses, and I met him when I just bumped into Bill Linnott in a recording
Really? When was
session.
that?
This is at the Townhouse, and I was there to just look over the studio because that's where I wanted to work. And Phil was actually going to give me a weekend of his time that he wouldn't be using. So I just went in to check out with him that it would be okay. And he was doing a really far out vocal at the time.
Phil was?
Yeah, it was really beautiful.
What, was this for his solo album or?
No, I think it was Thin Lizzy because the band was there with him. And Jimmy just happened to be there, and I just sat next to him. And we were both going, "Oh, great voice," you know. And I just happened to hear that he'd been involved in a couple of other things that I liked, so it was quite a coincidence. And it seemed just sort of right, really, to use him for the rockier tracks. But like, there's a couple of other tracks, like Pull Out the Pin. I really wanted a double bass on that, so I had to get a double bass player, and I wanted it to be quite sort of funky, without being flippant or sort of jazz rock, you know what I mean? And I knew Danny Thompson from having seen him work with John Martin, and I really liked it because like with John's voice and his bass, it was really very free and I found it very expressionful, not sort of technical, but very emotional double bass playing. So I thought he'd be perfect for that track. And that happened with quite a few musicians where although I've got more or less a set band, there's really quite a few tracks where perhaps guest people come in for this or that reason. And I suppose in a lot of ways it worried me at the start because of perhaps lack of continuity. But then because the songs were so different from each other, I'm glad now that that's the way it worked, but I did have some worries at the time because I was using, maybe 3 or 4 different people.
Right.
But I'm actually quite pleased with the way it came out.
So you've not really got a band as such anymore, have you?
No, that's actually quite a depressing thought.
Well, not really.
Well, no, I suppose not, because it leaves me nice and open.
I mean, you see what Kevin Rowland's doing with Dexter's Midnight Runners?
No.
Well, he's got a central nucleus of about 3, right, and the stage show incorporates about 11.
Right.
And he can't keep 11 people on wages, so he calls them up when he wants them.
Right, so just keeps the 3.
And I think that's really how rock's going to move. And the people that aren't working with him, when they're not working with him, they've got a reputation from him
Yes.
to go on and do session work.
Yes, that's lovely. See, I think I'm a bit like that in that, I mean, right from the start, I've definitely carried two people with me all the way. Well, three, I suppose. You know, like Pan has always been involved.
He's your brother, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Is he a guitarist?
Well,
Or accordion?
no, he plays like a lot of different instruments. And again, you know, he really is the one who's allowed me to use unusual instruments because he happens to be able to play them. So it's great because Pad's got this real knack of being able to pick up nearly any instrument that's unusual and just have a feel for it.
Was he some kind of influence behind the didgeridoo, for example?
Yes, I mean, I do think Pad actually started the initial interest in me in unusual ethnic instruments because, I mean, for years he's been interested in them and building them and making them, like you'll find an instrument that hasn't been made for hundreds of years and he'll build one. So, I mean, that is very stimulating.
How old is Pad? Is he younger or
No,
older
he's
than
a
you?
bit older than me, yes, but I think he definitely has been a strong stimulus in that area, especially
Right.
with the instruments, because he's really brought to my notice a lot of instruments that I'd never heard of before, but he makes them familiar to me. I get to know the sound of them, and then maybe one day when I'm writing a song, I think, oh yeah, that sound that Pad had, that'd be great in there.